Hello and welcome to another clip brought to you by the Digest and ELT Central, your one-stop student survival study skills shop. It's great to have you aboard again. Don't forget to subscribe and then click on the bell to make sure you don't miss any of our future clips. Feel free to share these clips among your colleagues and peers and spread the love. As we all know, and certainly if you've seen any of my previous videos, essay writing is one of the biggest aspects of school, college and university life, and writing essays also presents problems for a lot of people. I know that when I began my university life, I was all over the place and I didn't have much of a clue. This was because I got into university through the back door. I took an access to higher education course, which is a year in full-time college, studying 5 subjects. Mine were English, Maths, History, Psychology and Social Studies. But that didn't fully prepare me enough for what lay ahead because honestly the teachers didn't have time to focus on individual students. I've also seen students who come from A-levels and plenty of them are not prepared either. Another big problem arises for people who've been out of education for a while and then they come back in to do a master's degree. And there are no two ways about it. The majority of them are very rusty and they need help. This is especially true of non-native speakers, and so I want to offer a step-by-step guide to help you break down the whole process of essay writing from start to finish. The design, the planning, the structure and the language. Now later on we are going to write a full essay step by step so that you have a proper understanding of what you need to write the perfect essay. Right, let's get this out of the way right at the start. As much as I needed to learn very quickly, I didn't cheat and neither should you. I have to say this because it's so important to the validity of our degrees, yours and mine. Never ever pass anyone else's work off as your own. Never pay anyone to do your work for you. Don't have a friend do your work for you either, and certainly never ever use an essay mill. They will rob you, they will devalue your degree and they will trash your university's reputation. I see a lot of cheats who try to get others to do their work for them, and there are lots who will do it for a fee. This is morally and ethically wrong and you must never go down this route. If you can't do the work, you're probably not good enough. Do your own work, do not cheat. Okay, we'll get to the writing process a little bit later, but first of all we need to get the fundamentals out of the way, and this is really important. The reader must know and understand all the technical terms we're going to use in the essay, and so we'll have to explain in the text what they are as we go along. If we use a term such as essay mill or contract cheat, we need to explain what that means. In short, an essay mill is a bunch of people willing to turn out your essay for a fee, and the same with a contract cheat, though they tend to be more individual than a company service. Let's run through what we mustn't do first of all. We mustn't waffle, we must be sharp and to the point, and we must be straight. We mustn't use cliched terms like in this day and age. We mustn't use slang like chuffed to bits, knackered, and remember kids are in fact baby goats. We mustn't contract forms like so what's, it's, there, or shorten words like adverts when we mean advertisement or telly when we mean television. We mustn't generalize, all students do it, and see that's a generalization. We mustn't use personal pronouns such as these kind of distractions prevent you from, or we all know smoking is bad for your health. An exception to this rule is as we have seen. Also, we must never assume our reader knows what our acronyms or initialisms stand for. And the difference between these terms, by the way, is an acronym uses initials that make up a word, like for example SCUBA, UNICEF, NATO, while an initialism is something like IBM or PCB or TNHE. We must also give the entire term in the first instance and bracket it immediately afterwards, and from then on we can use the initials. As this example shows, transnational higher education, brackets TNHE, brackets, account for a large percentage of blah blah blah, and we also need to make sure we don't use so many of them that it becomes confusing for the reader. A brief look at articles. We must use them correctly. For example, this one here, the children listen to the music all morning. That would be wrong because if we talk about the music, then we're talking about something specific, whereas the children listen to music all morning, that's good because we don't know what kind of music it is. Since internet became widely available is wrong because internet needs an article in front of it, since the internet became widely available. If you want to know more on how to use articles, see my most common academic mistakes video for more help. Use of capital letters. Use them for the start of a sentence, for names and for proper nouns, countries, the first word of a quote, days and months, holidays, and main words in titles, unless of course it's in the references section and you're using APA. Also cap nationalities like English, Welsh, Iraqi, and time and periods, Victorian and Middle Ages. Do not use capitals for words or terms such as marketing or public relations, unless you're using PR as an initialism, of course. Now, I've heard some people describe an essay as being like a burger, and I've even heard one person describe it to a bunch of master's students like being a dinner party, which is ridiculous. It has a format, yes, but to allude it to some obscure metaphor of a dinner party is quite frankly laughable. It's nothing like a burger and even less like a dinner party. An essay is like an essay. It has a start, middle and end, and we're going to walk through the whole structure to make it as easy as possible for you to replicate. As I mentioned before, I'll even walk you through putting an essay together so that you have a decent exemplar to use as a guide. When we write, we understand exactly what it is we want to say. We also have to make sure that it's plain for everyone else to understand too. This is why we have to make sure that every sentence we write makes sense, that every idea is geared towards supporting and proving our point. Our essay has to flow. It has to have coherence. It must have a point. It also has to be meaningful and it has to make perfect sense. If a reader has to work out what we want to say, then we've got it wrong. Working to the rubric. Always, always, always work to the rubric. I cannot stress this enough. Rubrics usually work from left to right. Left is poor, right is good. The rubric will tell you exactly what your essay needs to do to score well. Here's an example of a rubric for an argumentative essay, and we can see from this example there are 5 elements that we can score points on. They are structure, analysis and evaluation of relevant material, important word here is relevant, evidence of research, referencing and presentation. Now, these may be self-explanatory to some of you, however, let's have a closer look for those who are starting out on their academic journey right now. Structure. This will examine how we've put our work together. It's the order of the work. The introduction provides an essay plan sentence that takes the reader through the order of the essay, and there's a thesis statement. The author has used the correct amount of body parts, and each has a topic sentence outlining the theme of the paragraph. There's a conclusion that wraps up the essay and restates the thesis statement, though it's not, I repeat, not merely a copy and paste of the introduction. And I've seen that far too many times. Analysis and evaluation. This looks at our relevant source material, and it's where the majority of the grade is going to be won, because it's where our argument comes to life and convinces the reader that we are right. Here is where we discuss and justify the evidence presented for arguments. So you must ask yourself, does your essay present a balanced and objective view of the subject? Do we present a well-structured argument using credible, peer-reviewed articles in credible journals? If so, we will probably do well. If we've relied on newspaper headlines, blogs and weekly magazines for our evidence, then we won't score so well, even if our argument is good. Evidence of research is where we show that we've read enough material about the subject to make us more than a novice, and that our tutor can see we've done our homework and studied material that experts have already written on. There's also a figure in this one. It says 11 sources, though I would probably present a few more to be on the safe side. Don't go for the minimum. The more you read, the better your understanding of the subject you will have. Referencing. I've said this before, and I'm sure I'm going to say it another million times, but this is where you can score the easiest points. There might not be that many of them, but they will help. Now, this is because there's a structure to referencing styles, and that will be subject to whichever references system you use. Get it right and we score maximum points. Now, imagine we're on a 49% grade and we fail, and we only score 4 on our referencing. What horror! This can take us from a fail to a pass, or a distinction to a high distinction. Now, for this one, I'm going to use APA as I find it the best and it's the most common. Do not mess up your referencing. What I'm going to do is give you a foolproof method of getting it right a little later, so do not stop watching. The next three elements we see here are usually grouped, although I don't feel that they should be. If we look at presentation, this means that we write it properly, we spell it correctly, we use correct punctuation, we get our grammar right. Now look at the format and get that right. Should the essay be 12 point in Times New Roman? Is it single or 1.5 line spacing? Is it set left or justified? Are the margins right? Are your references indented and in alphabetical order? Now, as far as rubric and formatting go, I would allocate 1 point to the 5 for each and 3 to the presentation. So rubric, attach it, formatting, do it. Once you finish your work, proofread it out loud. Look at the words that your Word doc underlines in red, that's for spelling, green for grammar, and blue, which is quite rare, but it's a formatting issue. And then fix them if they need fixing. Word also gets this wrong sometimes too, so if you spell in English rather than Americanish, the one rule is that you keep it constant. If you use an S in organize, use it all the time. Don't mix S's and Z's. If you spell colour with a U, keep that up throughout. If possible, get a fluent and good native English speaker to proof your work for you. If you're a second language speaker, there are little things that you might miss. I've seen even the best students lose points because of fossilized mistakes that you get away with in spoken language, but not in written. Use of synonyms. Have a thesaurus next to you and have a dictionary next to you, and make sure that all of the words you use are in context. I've said this before. Context is king, and again, if you want to have a look at my most common mistakes video, there's more about synonym usage in there. Research. We're getting closer to the real thing. Let's have a look at finding the research we need. Now, we need to do as much of this as we can and make it relevant to the piece that we're working on. It's going to give us a better understanding of the subject so that we can present a more rounded and solid argument. The best places to go are obviously the internet, our university library or journals, but these are also going to be available on the internet too. One of the best places to start is Wikipedia. However, you must never quote it, you must never copy from it, and you must never rely on it as gospel. The reason for this is because it's a wiki, which means anyone can change, add, or alter anything on the site. Now, the good thing about Wikipedia is there are lots of geeks who keep an eye on it and change things back quite quickly. The best thing about Wikipedia is that it provides us with a huge, great reference list at the bottom of the page that we can go to. Many of these references also have a digital object identifier or DOI, and that can take us directly to the source. Context. We have to look at which side of the argument we're going to come down on. Are we pro or are we anti? Do other opinions affect how we're going to approach it, or do they sway our views? There are other factors we have to look at too: gender, race, geography, ethnicity or age group, poverty, weather. All of these things might affect our study. So we need to see if any of those may affect ours. The thesis statement. Our thesis statement tells the reader exactly what the piece is going to do. It should be specific and it should address the point. For example, if we have a question such as, is genius born or can it be taught? This is a nature-nurture argument and probably as old as philosophy itself. First, we have to look at what is a genius. When we talk about genius, we generally accept that we're talking about IQ. But what about art? What about music? What about sport? What about tank battle tactics or chess? The best way to start is to brainstorm. Remember, we must first explain what genius is and how we are going to use that. Now, we might want to take talent, ability, creative inventiveness, whatever. We can decide on the stance we want to take, and then we can write our thesis statement based on that. Structuring and mapping our essay. Again, we'll brainstorm and work out which part is the strongest and which research piece supports which point we're going to make. The strongest part will almost certainly become our first main body paragraph. What I find effective is writing the points down in the order I believe they're most important. Now, we have to make sure that each is relevant to the subject or topic, as this will give the essay credence. Also, make sure the ideas come in a logical order. Once that's done, then the hard work begins. Right, let's start writing an essay together. The introduction. This is where we tell the reader what to expect from the rest of the essay. Therefore, our introduction should be a plan of the whole essay. So we'll have one sentence for each point we want to make, and at the end of the introduction we'll have our thesis statement, which is essentially a summary of the piece, almost like a very brief abstract. But we'll go through that process a little bit later. All right, for now, let's have a look at what we can write about. I want to start with something that's relatively easy, all right, so it makes it easy for you, and something that's also close to my heart, fast food and the problems it causes. How do we turn this into an essay question? First, let's see if we can find some valid points. The three major aspects of the food industry that I feel are noteworthy are health, the environment, and animal cruelty. Do we need anything more? Well, if we're looking at a 4-body paragraph, 1,500 word essay, I would say we don't. And so let's work these points now into a title. Right, so fast food and the problems. If we're talking about health, environment, and animal cruelty, we're talking about just about everything, aren't we? We're talking about humans, and we're talking about the planet. So let's put that into the title. Let's look at how does the fast food industry threaten the future of humanity and the planet? What we can also do is say, does the fast food industry threaten the future of humanity and the planet? But this is too simple a yes or no question. And so I'm going to chuck the how on the front of that. That looks like it's going to bring a decent argument. So let's see the types of threat that we think the fast food industry brings with it. Health. Right, the first thing that springs to mind is obesity. But there's also heart disease, and then there's diabetes. Next, we look at the environment. This conjures up images for me of greenhouse gases, water pollution, deforesting, and carcinogens. Animal cruelty always makes me think of hens crammed into cages and horrible factory farm conditions for cattle. Okay, so if I want to look here for the environment, a simple way of doing this is if I search rainforests chopped for fast food. What that brings us up, it brings us up with Greenpeace, which is credible, so we can use that one. Another one here is World Health Organization slams fast food, and I can see here WHO hits out at junk food companies. Now, what I can also see on there is a mention of the Lancet. And so what I'm going to do is find the Lancet article from this article itself. Another way is going to Google Scholar, and if you look on the left of this picture, you'll see I've clicked on since 2016, because what I want to do is I want to present relevant evidence. And so I go to Google Scholar, I type in fast food and its effect on health, and this is the result I get. Around about 244,000 results, but I can pick and choose the ones I like. And as you can see, I've clicked on this one down here, fast food consumption and its associations with obesity and hypertension among children. I've also heard junk food causes type 2 diabetes. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to type in rise in type 2 diabetes due to fast food. And look what comes up there. Medical news today, junk food and diabetes, the link, the effects and tips, blah, blah, blah. So I can go on there. This is how we get our searches. Another search term, how does fast food pollute the planet? Okay, so we're talking about the environmental effect here. Again, you can see there are over 19,000 results, but I'll choose the ones that I think will support my argument the best. As you can see, there are plenty of hits, and so to save going through the whole process, I've run through them and taken those I like and put them in a folder. Don't forget that we might not use all of these, but it's better to have and not need than need and not have, as Clarence Worley said in True Romance. If you haven't seen that film, by the way, it's great, you should watch it. If you're doing the essay with me, then you can do the same. Now, this is the result I got for health, and I'm going to go through each of them and click on each result that I think will help me build a good argument against the fast food industry. The environment covers a number of issues like greenhouse gases, water usage and deforesting, which are the main culprits. So we'll have a look at those individually. First, I want to find the results for the amount of greenhouse gases that cows belch and fart out. And here are the results for that aspect. Water. Okay, the water footprint of a kilo of beef is crazy. It's 15,500 litres of water to produce a kilo of beef. And so when you think about how many kilos of beef come from one cow, that is a massive amount of water. There are something like 3,600 litres of water per kilo of chicken, which is also crazy. Then we look at deforesting, and we can see around 6.7 million acres of tropical forests are bulldozed or burned for cattle production each year. Now, this accounts for over half of deforestation in South America and is more than 5 times as destructive as any other commodity in the region. And so it stands to reason that this is a serious threat to plant and animal species. We could move on to the food packaging as well, the plastic and wrapping and that waste, but Honestly, I don't think we're going to have the word count to do that, so we might have to leave that one out. Then animal treatment. So I want to look at the amount of cattle that are slaughtered every year to support the fast food industry. I found that 122 million cows have been slaughtered since McDonald's inception. And these figures don't include Burger King or other fast food companies either. Then we have the number of hens slaughtered. A KFC kills 1 billion. That's 1 billion hens a year to provide meat for their outlets, and that's only KFC. Now, KFC also admit that hens are typically fast-growing breeds that suffer liver and heart failure, as well as foot problems due to the weight and speed of growth. Now, 10% of hens suffer hockburn caused by the amount of ammonia produced when other hens pee. So around 4% of hens die on the farms before they're slaughtered. Now, this is excluding Jollibee, Chick King, Chicken House, Chickies, Albake, or the hundreds of lesser known outlets. Okie dokie. Now we've got our points, we have to decide which of them is most important and we'll call it the biggest emotional reaction. Let's face it, we're writing this for a reason, so we want to grab the reader's attention. Now, if I'm clever about this, I'm hardly going to have to do any work other than paraphrase. I've got over 20 sources. That's probably too many, and I'll have to leave some of them out. But if I can find a couple of sentences from enough of them to piggyback off, I'll be well away, and most of the essay is going to be written for me. Albeit that I will paraphrase the original author's work and then cite and reference those parts. By doing this, I will make it very easy for myself, and I won't have to be tempted into paying some predatory creep to do my work, and now I won't get done for plagiarism either. So how cool is that? Our introduction should lay out the plan, while our conclusion should wrap up with the same, essentially saying that we've proved what we wanted to. But what we want to do first is get the most important aspects of the topic for the body parts. The reason we're going to do that is so that we have a strong body of evidence that we can use to form the introduction and conclusion. Okay, so your essay is going to run: introduction, this is what we're going to do. Body parts, this is what we are doing. Conclusion, this is what we've done. Let's begin. Okay, let's say, for example, we've got an essay assignment that has a 1,500 word limit. We'd usually have a 200 or so word intro, a 200 or so word conclusion, and 4 body parts of around 300 or so words each. So we're going to be limited with what we are able to say. While 1,500 words might sound daunting initially, it really is not. We're only going to have 10 or 12 sentences per paragraph to put our argument across, so we have to be succinct. Don't forget that this is an argumentative essay, so we're going to have some kind of rebuttal in the penultimate paragraph, although I think we'll be hard pushed to find a decent argument other than the amount of employment it brings. Although a quick search on basic wage payments, 0 hours contracts and tax avoidance schemes will almost certainly put paid to that. Right, we're allowed a 10% either way stretch, and so I want to include all the main health aspects, the main environmental aspects, and then the animal cruelty. Of course, if you want, you can change the order or the subject. It's entirely up to you. The paragraphs. Each of our body parts will start, as I'm sure you're aware, with a topic sentence, and each should address a different point. We've already got some decent points, and I don't think we'll get anything more poignant, and so let's stick with those. The first will be health, the second environment, and the third animal cruelty. Now, some people might put animal cruelty ahead of human health, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. Whatever, these sentences will set out what we want to say in each paragraph, and it will follow up with more information and supporting statements with citations from our reliable and credible sources. Here's the essay plan. You can see here what I've done is put the points across that I want to make that will go with what I already know about the fast food industry. You may have to do a little more research on whatever subject you use, but this is what I got from mine. I've given a brief intro and topic sentence for each of the paragraphs I want to use to support my argument. I will need to find something for a rebuttal, but I'll do that later. Right, to be paraphrased, what I will do next is go through all the articles I found and look for evidence to support my theories. Here's one I got earlier, and what I'll do is find a sentence or two that I can use and highlight it, copy it, and paste it into a new document that I will call To Be Paraphrased, and I'll turn it red. I do this so I know what I need to paraphrase. Once I've done that, I'll turn my copy black, but I'll leave the original there in case I need to adjust it at some point or go back to it. I'll also cite it and format the reference while I'm here, and leave it under the piece I'm going to paraphrase. I will do this with all the sources I've got, and I'll keep each under the title of Par 1, Par 2, or whatever. Don't worry too much about the intro here, as I can adjust that later to suit the essay. As this is an argumentative essay, we want to prove a point, and we can use some great adjectives to do that, even though we'll quite possibly come across as being a little biased, but this is about human health, the planet's welfare, and animal cruelty. So while we may come across as biased, we need to try and be as objective as possible, even though it's difficult to argue against us. Think about relevance. What does each point, each sentence, each paragraph, what does it do to support our argument? The first draft, right, we've got the articles. Now what we need is to search for information we can use to good effect. So I'll do a very quick scan through the pieces. You can see from this example, I've taken the most poignant parts and turned it into my own work. Though I will of course credit the original research with the citation, and I'll highlight each of those in yellow. This is so that at the end of the work I can check each reference with the correct citation. Now there will be references I don't use, and this is a foolproof way of ensuring I don't include them once I've finished the essay. You'll also notice there are sentences I'm going to have to find a citation for, and I'll do that at a later stage as and when I come across them, or I may have to search for them specifically, but I will make sure that I find them. Once I find the terms that I think are going to add value, I'll copy them and paste them into a new document. Do this with each of the articles and build the evidence up in order of how we're going to present it in the essay. So we know it's going to be health, environment and animal cruelty, and then a rebuttal in that order. Try writing the piece in one sitting as you follow the ideas you've drafted down in your brainstorm session. Start as you mean to go on to. Grammar, spelling, that sentences begin and end properly and make sense. This isn't going to be the finished article. It will be sketchy and will need tightening at some point in the future. You might also find that the essay moves in a different direction, but then you may not. But you should be prepared to follow a path that might present itself to you at some point. This is why it's important not to have an intro finished at this point. So you're better off writing the intro after you've got your main body parts together, as by that time you're going to know where the essay is going. If you've got a set question, it might not go down this route, but don't worry. By this stage, you'll almost certainly have loads of references and possibly too much information. And this will be the point that you'll start paring it down. It's also the point that you should make a cup of coffee. Second or final draft. Now, you may only have to do 2 drafts, you might have to do 3. However, with the second draft, it's important that you make a copy of the first draft and call it first draft. Why do we do that? It's simple. It's because we might make a huge great hash of it and we may have to start again. Hopefully that won't be the case. In the second draft, you'll make the work flow by using transitional words or sentences, filling in your points and bringing the work together. But again, it still has to flow. These phrases and words are handy and could help with that flow. In the first place, furthermore, not only but also, as well as, in addition to, likewise. That is not to say, similarly, by the same token, equally, in the same way. Another way of looking at it, while argues, arguably, opposing view states, and blah 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 blah. Once you've finished your second draft, sit down and have another cup of tea or coffee. Leave the work for a couple of days, work on another assignment, and then come back to the second draft and have another look. Check the grammar. Check the red, check the green, check the blue lines in the Word document and correct them if you need to. Check the spelling. Does it still do what it's supposed to do? As you can see from this, I ended up using 18 of the 26 sources. So what I'm going to do is go through the essay and tick off those I've cited against those in my reference list, and I'll bin the ones I haven't used. My word count at the moment is 1,598, but we're allowed a 10% plus or minus, and so I'm there or thereabouts. Right, I left this a couple of days and came back to it to give it a final tweak to make it spot on. Let's have a quick look at the differences. You can see there aren't that many of them, as I was relatively happy with it after the first draft, but I'm an experienced writer and so I kind of knew exactly what I wanted to say. This level of essay would blitz any foundation or first year university assignment, though you would of course have to do a tiny little bit more work if you didn't know your subject. If you follow the same structure that I've done with this, you can't fail. You may well disagree with my stance and you might want to fight for the burger joints, and that's fine. As long as you can find the evidence to support your theory, you're okay. This should be close to the finished article now, and you should have all your citations in place and each should be in your reference list already. It's probably a good time to write your intro here. Have a look at the thread of the essay and write the intro from that, bearing in mind each paragraph and the order they come in. Once you're finished with the introduction, of course, the next step is to write the conclusion. And all that does is wraps up neatly what you've already said. Do not introduce any new evidence at this stage. All of that should have come in the preceding paragraphs. Now is where you'll check the cover sheet is attached and the rubric if that's what's requisite. Is the font all the same all the way through? You'll check the format and assignment guides to make sure you've got the correct spacing, the correct font, the correct reference style, indented, and the citations match your references and that it's in alphabetical order. You'll also check the rubric and make sure you tick the boxes on the right hand side. If you've got a Grammarly account, most universities offer this free of charge, use it. If you have Studiosity, use that too. If it's free, make use of it. A little word of warning though, Grammarly doesn't always get it right. If you can get a decent native speaker to have a browse through before you submit it, it will help. Also, read it out loud to yourself and someone else who might listen. You will not believe the amount of mistakes you'll find doing this. On a final check, do not use first-person narrative. Do not plagiarize. Don't use contracted forms. Don't plagiarize. Don't use capital letters where you shouldn't. And do not plagiarize. Do use the rubric to check your work is on target. Don't plagiarize. Make sure the information ties in with the main idea and that it's coherent, and don't plagiarize. Do get someone to look over your work for you and read it out loud. Don't plagiarize. Don't use a synonym generator or words you don't understand. And don't plagiarize. Self-respect is very important. Do not ever, 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 ever use an essay mill. Never pay someone to do your work for you. If you do that, you should not be at university. And one final word of warning, do not try to use this essay as your own, as I've already run it through Turnitin, and it will return your score as 100% plagiarized. I've shown you how to do it. Have a go and let me know if you need more help. Don't forget to check out my other videos and subscribe and click the reminder bell so that you don't miss any further clips and handy tips on academic development that I drop. There are also some fantastic interviews with some of the world's most eminent researchers too, so make sure you have a look at those. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it really helpful. If there's any subjects you want me to cover that I haven't covered already, give me a shout and I will do that for you. Also, if you need personal help, personal tuition, you can buzz me through here as well. Ciao for now.